Hey people, welcome back to my channel. I'm back with another video, but this time I decided to do it a little bit different and show you guys the whole process of editing photography work. So my client for the day was my friend Georgia, so it was a bit more informal. We went up to London and we walked around and took pictures. She just wanted a few new profile pictures to use. So once the shoot finished, I uploaded all of the footage onto my hard drive and the process begins. I obviously had time this day when I was editing because I decided to go through each picture in the Finder folders and just tag which ones I liked and which ones I was going to take over into Lightroom. So we'll fast forward this bit, tag. Just went through all of it. And then finally I was ready to take it over to Lightroom. Oh, these are some pictures that I took for my family's event they had the other day. That was really fun. Anyway, so here you can see that I've imported all of the pictures and I can just quickly review them, ready to be uploaded. And let's start the editing process. So I'm going to start with these ones on the end where she's just on the stairs. I started off with changing the whites, so lifting the whites and darkening the blacks just to give a nice contrast. And because she's wearing black, I decided to then go in with the shadow. Then we will move on to the highlights. As you can see there, you get the notification for not having enough storage. That's why I tend to go through all of my stuff beforehand. So I've increased the contrast here a little bit. Because I wanted the blacks to really stand out against the white, and then I also went to make it a little bit brighter just so that you can see her features properly. Then I've moved on to the curve section, which I never usually use, but I thought let me just try it. I've been using it more recently now to just change the contrast, change the color tones. I think I tend to go for more warmer tones, so I think you'll see that being used here. As you can see, I'm playing with the yellows and the blues at the moment just to see what I like, playing with the greens and the pinks too. I then went over the highlight and shadow curve again just to make sure that we had real definition. I didn't want it to be too bright to blow out the whites, but I didn't want it to be too dark to where you can't see her and she just blends into the background. Then again, I went down to the temperature and moved it around accordingly. Again, like I said, I prefer things to look a little bit more warmer. And of course, I always think it's good to bring the saturation up, not too much, never too much, but you want to make sure that the subject has colour in their face. And to go into more detail, I use the colour mixer to bring up the orange tones in her face. And as you can see here, what happens when you go over or underboard. So you just want to make sure it's slight and minor changes that you're making. Okay, into the color grading. This is the fun bit for me. I feel like as I've grown, I've learned how to use Lightroom a little bit better, but I wasn't using this up until maybe this year. Like the color grading, I feel like I was like real basic with my editing before, but I love the color grading aspect. I feel like it actually gives the photo character. And here is where I just love to just play around. So here you can see I've gone for a blue mid-tone and then I've changed the highlights to a green. And I always feel like that kind of combination gives it a really old school look, which is very much my vibe. So yeah, I've gone, you can see you can go for reds, you can go for more blues. I really like that blue, but I think I prefer the green much more. And then also that was the shadows. And then the highlights, I don't play too much with the highlights if I'm honest. Just going back here to bring in more of the yellow and even that out a little bit more. Then one of my favorite features is the grain. Love a grain. As you can see zoomed in, it makes all the difference. Then I move on to a vignette. So I usually tend to have vignettes on my pictures. I don't know, I feel like it brings the subject into focus a little bit more. Then we bring the dehaze in just to saturate it a little bit more and crush the colours in. Obviously with the vignette I went too dark, so I'm gonna lift it up. And then we go in with the texture and clarity. So this is always for the subject's face. How intense do you want it to look? How sharp do you want them to look? I feel like when it's a wider shot, it doesn't matter as much, but the little touches do make a difference. So I've upped the clarity and I've upped the texture. And the best thing about Lightroom, I'm sure most of you will know, is the copy and paste factor that they have. So once I've got the look that I want, I literally just copy and go on to the next picture and paste, and then you can just make minor adjustments where necessary. I don't think I needed adjustments here. I think they look amazing. It kind of looks a little bit, she looks a little bit sun-kissed. It looks like the sun shining on her, which I really love. So yeah, then I'll just go through and copy and paste to each picture. And obviously as we've got different pictures and different spaces, we have to edit those too. So this is this set of pictures edited and done, but we have to move on to the next section as well. For these sets of pictures, we wanted to keep the colours and everything very similar. Obviously she is in a similar setting, but it's a little bit different. Obviously you can see the lighting's changed. The main thing I wanted to do was actually give it that old school yellow teal kind of look, and then also add the grain as well, which I did really well, I think. So again, a lot of that is to do with the color grade and just changing and making things. So I made the midtones blue, I made the shadows green again, and I brought in a little bit of pink for the highlight as well. I also made sure that I pulled the orange and yellow colours out so that she wasn't faded into the background. We can see that she's a brown lady. And yeah, I really am quite happy with the way these ones turned out as well. Okay, now moving on to the portrait shots that I got of Georgia. So again, I start with putting up the whites and darkening the blacks just to give it contrast. Darkening the shadows as well and pulling out the highlights. This is all kind of just for contrast and just making the picture pop as much as possible. And again, you see I've upped the contrast and exposure. I kind of tend to shoot a little bit darker than usual, I've noticed, so I always have to put up the exposure regardless. Then we move on to saturation, just to again make her pop, make the greens in the back stand out as well. And I changed the temperature to a blue and a bit more of a warmer pink tone. Then we go to the colour mixer again. We pull out the oranges, not too much though, have to make sure that it's a little bit more subtle. But because it's a portrait, it's a very important aspect to have. So you want to make sure that the tones are as close to her natural skin colour as possible. And then we're back to the colour grading. So for this one, I made sure that the midtones were blue. I brought out the shadows into a yellow tone, and I didn't do anything with the highlights. It's important to play with the clarity and the texture effects, just to make sure again that her features are popping out, but also you don't want to make her look too hard as well. For me, and I know that I don't personally like that on portraits. I don't like when their faces are just too harsh and you can see every wrinkle and every, you know, dark circle that they've got. Then I went onto the grain, of course. I upped the grain. You can see here, when you up it just gives it that old school vibe that I just love. And then we just copy and paste. There we go. And she looks great here. I really love that you can see the blues in the sky, and the greens are really vibrant as well, and her face too. I feel like I maybe went a little bit too dark on her jacket. We lose a bit of the colour there, but I'm not too bothered about that because I'm focused on her face and how she looks. So for these sets of pictures, I actually copied over the settings from the other pictures where she's outside of the door again, just as a base, because I like to see what it looks like with that and then see if I need to make any changes, any additional changes. As you can see, it's really dull. Like, the picture itself is so dull. Once you paste those settings on, it just changes the picture completely. Again, I had to play around with the color grading, and I went for more green and blue tone. Again, I really loved the aesthetic of that old school vintage look. So you can kind of see the greens coming off of her black coat. Instead of it being completely black, you can see the green tones on that. And also you can see how the white pillars kind of change colours as well. Now that I'm happy with my edits, I just go back through and tweak little bits that I think need to be changed. Sometimes I go back to a picture and I'm like, oh, that actually doesn't look great. Let me just quickly change this and that. But they're usually really minor things. And then we go to export. So you have to select all of your photos, click export, and then it brings you to this new page. So first you want to change the quality. Usually I do it a little bit less than 100. It doesn't always need to be 100, depending on where you want to put these pictures. Then I go on to change the name. The name is usually whatever you last saved it as. So you just change that, and you change the starting number as well. And then you just export and you click where you want all of your pictures to go. Once that's all done, hit export, and you can see in the top corner it's exporting, and it will show you how long it will take to do that. I then open them up in my Finder folder, and this is really important as a review. I always go through each picture near enough one by one and just open them out to make sure that they actually look exactly how I wanted them to look. It's always like a double check that I do. You want to also make sure that you're checking the framing. Is it how you want it to be framed? Are the colours exactly how you saw it when you was editing? If not, what do you need to change? Can you see the grain come out a little bit more? If you can't, maybe you need to up it. So I just go through these one by one, check which ones I need to change and not. Changing the exposure, maybe changing the highlights. All these things are little small minor tweaks. But you know, when you see your photo and it's not exactly how you want it to look, you have to go back and change it. So I went through all of these. My laptop's about to die. And I hit export again and went through them all again, made sure I was happy with them, and Bob is your uncle. Last step is to get the photos over to your client. I use WeTransfer to do that, and then I send them over, see how they like them. Usually they like them without any changes, but if I need to make changes, I will. Really happy with the results. She was really happy, and this is just how I use Lightroom. It's not like the most professional way to use it. I know I'm not an expert, but I think I make my pictures look pretty good. So if you have any tips or tricks that you want to share with me, if there's anything that you did learn from here, let me know, and I will see you in the next video.